One of the very important issues over the past few decades, and certainly the past few years, is mental health. And that care has improved certainly across the board. But in the area of aviation, a lot of professionals there, pilots, air traffic controllers, afraid to ask for help because they fear losing their licenses. U.S. Senators John Hoeven from North Dakota and Tammy Duckworth of Illinois introduced a Mental Health in Aviation Act this past spring with the goal to modernize FAA mental health regulations, encourage early treatment for aviation professionals to remove the stigma here. It passed in September. It is still ongoing there in Washington, but at the University of North Dakota, the aviation program has been working the past few years to really take a deep dive into this, to improve mental health care for students. So UND psychologist Sky Overbo specializes in aviation psychology, joining us now. Thank you for being here, and certainly got to say that Sky seems like the most appropriate name to be working in the aviation field.
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah. Give us your background in this. I know you came into the UND aviation program, about 3 years ago or so, and I think when you came in there, you said you were shocked that this seemed 20 or 30 years behind in the aspect of mental health. It's the resources in the aviation industry. Tell us what you mean by that, what you discovered then.
Yeah, and just before I start too, I want to make sure that, we recognize that these are my opinions and not necessarily UND's opinions.
Absolutely.
But when I came in, I was shocked at how much stigma and fear there was still surrounding mental health. Because you look at all other college students and other just adults in the U.S., and most people are generally okay with talking about mental health. There's a lot of resources out there. People are sort of pushed into therapy or mental health care if they need it. And for pilots, that was not the case. There was a lot of fear and judgment there still.
Yeah, and I know a lot of this grew out of an incident in 2021 where a 19-year-old John Hauser took his own life while on a flight, and the note he'd left to his parents, nobody knew he was dealing with mental health issues, and a note that he had left said, if anything can come of this, it's that the FAA changes regulations. Because here was a student who was afraid of losing his ability to be a pilot if he reached out for help. Is that an accurate summary, and is that an accurate depiction of what you see as a broader issue?
Yeah, his death really spurred UND and I think other places around the country to really push the improvement of mental health care for pilots and air traffic controllers and other aviation personnel. There is such a big fear surrounding seeking help for mental health care that pilots and air traffic controllers just don't. And by the time that they feel the need to reach out for help, it's too late. And that's what UND and a lot of other organizations around the country and around the world are trying to prevent. We want people to reach out early and often and prevent problems before they get to be those big overwhelming ones.
Yeah, what is the history here, the reality of this? If somebody in aviation, historically, before the changes that you're implementing here, if they did reach out saying, that there was a mental health issue, if they had that stigma, that fear, because what would happen in those scenarios when they reached out?
Yeah, so the FAA has put in a lot of work in updating some of the rules and regulations, but prior to these, the fear was that a pilot or an air traffic controller would lose their medical certification, which is needed to be able to fly, to work in the tower, to do anything. And pilots and air traffic controllers spend a lot of time and money in training to be able to do their job. And for example, if a person reported a diagnosis of depression or adjustment disorder, which is very often diagnosed if you just go to normal therapy, if you had that diagnosis and you reported it, they would lose their ability to fly right then and there. because their medical would be taken away.
Yeah.
Now the FAA has put in these new rules and regulations that allow for some of the more minor diagnoses, such as adjustment disorder or unspecified anxiety disorder, depression, to be given a medical, not even a special issuance, which is usually required for mental health concerns, but the air medical examiner is able to automatically give that at their appointments, which speeds up the process significantly.
Certainly, that's and you can kind of understand when you're dealing with aviation. If somebody reports mental health, the conventional thinking for so long is, well, we can't have them either controlling aircraft or behind the controls of an aircraft. And so that sort of makes sense until you think about, well, if this is going undiagnosed and untreated, then it's just compounding the concerns, right?
Yeah. And just like the rest of the people in the world, pilots and air traffic controllers experience mental health concerns. I mean, if you've had a bad night of sleep, if you've had a rough call from your partner, your head is not necessarily going to be in the game. And for the majority of America, you're able to reach out for support through therapy, through talking to your doctor, friends, colleagues, and get support. But for pilots and air traffic controllers, that has not been an option. And for a large portion of aviation personnel, it still feels like it's not an option.
So you mentioned, getting the FAA regulations changed in order to remove the stigma, in order to speed up, getting the help and the process, that people don't have that fear that it's going to be a long time to get back behind the wheel or behind the controls of an aircraft. What is UND? What is your program also doing concurrently to that to improve mental health access and response?
So along with the laws that are trying to get passed through the Senate and the House, UND has also worked with local legislation to get funding to create an aerospace medicine center, which would provide care to aviation personnel in North Dakota, including some of the general aviation pilots who are usually farmers that haven't been able to access care. A large portion of what I do here, though, is see aviation students, whether that's air traffic control, whether that's commercial pilots, what have you, and I see them for therapy. I am embedded in the aviation buildings, so hopefully that reduces the barrier, makes people more comfortable with coming to see me. I'm a real person. I'm not in some high and mighty building. And UND has also started the Uplift Peer Support Program. So I believe it was in 2022, they started the Uplift Peer Support Program. And that is sort of overseen by me as far as the training, make sure people know how to support their peers in a way that makes them feel heard and understood, and then also direct them to services if they are experiencing sort of a higher level of distress than what the peer can handle. So we currently have about 15 or so peers that take calls from students in the aviation program and give support that way. And this has been ramping up pretty good. We keep getting more and more people each semester, and I think it's been really helpful for a lot of folks.
Is this program, does it remain unique now, or has this inspired similar programs at other aviation schools across the country?
So our program was one of the first collegiate peer support programs, which was a really cool thing to walk into. But now we have a lot of other collegiate programs who are actually following suit or coming up with these new and other unique ways to support their peers, whether that's like a therapist in the buildings, whether that's a secondary service that people can use in the program, or other peer support programs as well.
Okay.
And peer support within Europe is very common. In fact, it's required by a lot of the legislature there. And United States is sort of behind in that aspect. So when the Aviation Rulemaking Committee put forth those 24 recommendations regarding aviation mental health. They did recommend for peer support programs to get more traction, get more support.
Okay, and finally here, some of the stresses that pilots face and air traffic controllers are obvious, right? I mean, there's stressful portions to that job. What are some of the other stresses that people may not think about that you see pilots experiencing?
Yeah, so I think for commercial pilots, air traffic control folks, their schedules are crazy. If you think about the shift work that a lot of people go through, having that crazy sleep schedule is really dysregulating a lot of the time. They spend long times away from home, from family, from support. They don't have very constant connections with a lot of their colleagues, so they're in the cockpit with someone new each time. There is also a large cost to losing their medical. So there is not a lot of support from airlines or other organizations. It's improving, but it still's lacking. And there's not a lot of support in keeping them on salary. So if a person loses their job, they are out for up to 2 years going through this process of getting their medical back.
Yeah.
And if they're not with a company who's very supportive, they're going to lose their livelihood.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking time for us today. A very important topic, and one that, a lot of us had never really thought much about before until you get kind of an eye-opening, conversation like this. Sky Overbo at the University of North Dakota, aviation psychology. Thanks for taking the time, and good luck with your continued work in this field.
Thank you, Rob.
All right.
Thanks for having me.